Hello and welcome to the Cavell Cloud Conversations podcast. My name is Patrick Watson. I'm Director of Research here at Cavell, and today's episode focuses on how voice is evolving beyond basic calling and becoming a strategic platform potentially in its own right. Across the industry, we at Cavell, we're seeing a few major shifts happening at the same time. And first is voice is being repositioned as an operating layer for business interactions. And secondly, one of the biggest trends within the industry at the moment is AI is starting to move from experimentation phase, from trials and proof of concepts, into something that communication service providers really need to monetize and turn into commercial propositions. And both of those things create pressure, but also an opportunity for service providers across Europe, particularly around speed to market, how they integrate voice, and how new services around AI are bundled, sold, and supported. And to discuss that today, I'm joined by Michal Podoski, VP of Product Management at Dstny. Michal, thanks for joining me. How are you today?
Very good. So thank you for having me, Patrick.
Absolute pleasure to have you with us. So, one of the things I wanted to start with, I know you at Dstny speak to providers all the time. So, when providers are looking at next generation voice use cases, what are some of the main challenges that communication to providers tend to run into on a sort of day-to-day basis?
That's a good question, and happy we are starting with that. So we see a lot of providers failing down when it comes to protecting their revenue amidst all of this innovation drive. So it is really about how do you innovate without disruption. And what we've seen that there is this mindset around the industry that it's almost like throwing the baby out with the bathwater when in terms of introducing innovation. I think that there is this strange dynamics where the service providers tend to forget, what made them great, because this is a terrific industry. What made them great in the first place, and where the real value is driven from, right? So what we are looking at right now is this strange situation where yes, there is a race for all of those new items, but really people don't spend much time looking at the compound value of the offering. And there is some data that we've got from during the work that we've been doing on our new product strategy. And what we've seen is that pretty much, 11% of the telcos really effectively use, for instance, AI to increase revenue. And this, from our perspective, is mainly due to the fact that, there is not a coherent story of driving the value from the real bottom, right? Which is those seats, the dial tone really upwards, up the stack.
11% is considering we're a tech industry, that's actually really what you consider really low adoption rates. We've got similar data from studies that we've done of service providers, operators, and you talk about that the classic margin and revenue degradation story at Cavell. We've been tracking margin degradation on core voice services, so minutes, termination, numbering over a number of years, and we're continuing to forecast that on a downward trajectory. So it's really important to look at these other areas. The other one I hear a lot about when I speak to telcos about using AI within voice capability is actually how long it might take them to do this, how difficult it is to integrate their voice solution with an intelligent solution. And do you see those as sort of barriers as obstacles when you speak to service providers in terms of how long it's going to take these solutions to market and how difficult it is to integrate the solutions?
Absolutely. It's one of the main pillars of the new product strategy of Dstny going to the market, because what we've seen is that, look, I mean, let's be honest about one thing. Layering items, innovation on top of each other is not an easy thing to do. It cannot, your portfolio cannot resemble just a number of random things thrown around with different user experience, different interfaces, different billing, different portals where you provision all of this, right? So in essence, I think bundling is one of the big things that the industry needs to solve, and how we look at this. And I think that this is what separates us from probably what I've seen other companies which have a heritage in telco, right? Because we have a very strong heritage in telco, how they look at driving innovation forward. And you know what we are looking at is, first of all, orchestration and architecture on a very technical side, meaning how do you take a standardized group of value-added services, the classical ones that you could expect, call recording, CRM, and how do you bring them to market together with what is relatively new. And it's new, as in, for instance, agentic AI for voice, which creates certain problems in how do you monetize it, right? Because then you have different cost bases. So I think altogether what I'm trying to get to is that from what we are trying to do is we are building almost like a business in the box delivery model in which we will be able to hand it over to our customer service providers and say, here's a platform that you can really test your go-to-market on, test your new portfolio, right? And if this really bites and it works in your market, let's then start thinking about all of those broad integrations, which what makes really this industry slow, right? Because you started your question with time. I think usually what makes telco slow is integration. So this is what we're trying to simplify.
So the approach from Dstny now is less so, and previously, we've had enablers within the market that would have taken different individual value-added services, and you mentioned an AI complicating that on a sort of side area in terms of voice AI capabilities. But say a call recording provider, so to integrate that in your stack would have potentially taken time to integrate that with your OSS BSS, and whereas what you're looking at is a more strategic bundled service of packages that a telco or an operator can take and easily provision and integrate with their existing systems and sell more quickly without. I suppose that reduces a bit of the complexity from the service provider side.
That's the whole idea. I mean, because again, the conversations we are having are about catering to the market that it's rather small, right? You have 0 to 10 use cases for business. You have 10 to 25 to 50. And, the only way that you can really thrive in that market is if you will have a standardized structured offering that you can bring to market quick in a standardized fashion with a lot of automation, which means that it needs to be put together in a coherent fashion through some sort of a centralized orchestrator with some sort of a included business support system. So without this, it becomes, again, a situation where a service provider looks at technology and says, okay, we need another 12 months to integrate this with our stacks. We are trying to really cut through this. And to your point, importantly, is one thing that it became very clear, right, especially in this industry, is that we cannot go into the service providers and say, okay, this UCaaS platform that you have, that you've been working for so long, that you standardized around, and that you have a pretty good run rate business from, that you need to exchange right now to something else in order to drive the value stack. Is the other way around, right? Whatever we are bringing as Dstny to market, it will work on other call control platforms, because otherwise the whole story changes. All of a sudden, instead of building value on top of whatever you have as seed revenue, you need to firstly exchange the underlying infrastructure, which makes no sense.
And I suppose you can't every time, and we're going to cover. I wanted to ask about something, the newer side of things. You can't just every time something new comes along rebuild your entire technology stack in order to incorporate one new piece. So I completely understand that. We mentioned it sort of at the top of this, and one of the biggest topics that the whole tech industry is talking about right now is AI, but primarily not necessarily from a use case perspective, but from the industry side. How do you commercialize and monetize that? And what I want to understand is how does the voice platform and services that you talked about, how does that, can you help providers offer sort of AI as a feature? Is that something that you're provisioning within the bundle? And is this How easy is that for a telco or communication service provider to add in and confidently sell and generate revenue from? Because we hear a lot about AI use cases. I think the commercialization piece is more of a challenge.
That is a good one, Patrick. This is one of those things that keep you awake at night when you're a product manager, like I am. And realistically speaking, I think the fair answer is the industry still doesn't know what good looks like. But I will tell you what we've seen and what we are doing, right? So first of all, if you will look at, let's take voice agents, because this is something close to our core business and something that we've invested a lot of time and engineering resources into. So if you will take a voice agent, let's say receptionist to market, I mean, the first problem that you will stumble upon is cost. Cost of how do you control that, right? Because on one hand, you have a voice receptionist that you go to a customer and say, here's a voice receptionist, and we will implement this together with your existing UCaaS seats. So what happens right now is that you're charging flat fees for the UCaaS seats, and then you're coming with a voice receptionist that theoretically, from the cost perspective, is driven highly by usage cost, which varies how depending on how efficient you are in asking questions to, let's say, a large language model in AI. But on the other hand, you have this fixed bundle. So our approach is to monetization is first of all carve out those AI functions, let's call them this way, in a simple enough way that we can box them into a flat fee with a specific amount of allocated usage credit. So in this fancy language, what I mean by this is you have this receptionist with a bundle of minutes that you can use. And this is immediately easy for the service provider to put on the shelf and start delivering to market with without ruffling too much feathers. Then the question is, obviously, some users might be power users. So there will be a question, what happens when I run out of those minutes? You need another bundle, right? Because the thing that we want to avoid for now is to try to persuade the market that voice agents should be charged per minute, like the good old times. We want to try fitting it in the status quo that has been here for the last 2 decades at least, that the fixed flat fee is the way to go. So this is how we will approach this. Are we 100% right? I'm not sure anyone is, but at least what we've seen is that you want to cater to this, smaller part of the market, 0 to 10 or 10 to 25. It is a good way to approach the customer. It will be very difficult to explain to what is a token, right? And how token translates to a minute. And all of a sudden they need to pay per minute for a receptionist.
And especially, and I think that disparity between the demand from end customers for cost transparency and as you said, that's traditionally been user subscription model basis, but actually the AI usage on the back end in terms of usage and consumption basis and marrying those two things is key. So as you said, especially if you're targeting specific market segments, so small business segments, that customer wants transparency, and you as the service provider want transparency on the usage side, especially as the technology is emerging in those areas. And one of the things that I know that you're always thinking about at Dstny is voice is such a core part of the Dstny experience and ultimately a lot of your service provider customer experiences. Where do you see voice going over the next few years? What should communication providers be preparing for now if they want to stay relevant in the voice world? As we start to talk more about AI, we start to talk more about automation, we start to talk about voice being a commodity or an operating system. What do you think the future is going to hold for what are you thinking about Dstny from that side of things?
I'm glad you've asked. So, look, first of all, I'm very happy to say that it is cool again to deal with voice. Because I remember, a few years ago when we were looking at the advent of collaboration systems that all of a sudden started becoming, de facto monopoly in UC. People were saying, "Ooh, we will be texting each other very soon. Why would you even look into voice?" And then all of a sudden, what happens is, turns out that you can talk to a machine, right? So it means that the primary way humans communicate, which is voice, it's relevant again, and that is good news, right? Because this industry knows more about voice than anyone else. Funny thing is that I don't remember having conversations in the industry where people would care about what codec you use to communicate. All of a
Yeah.
sudden, it becomes
Now
important again.
codecs are massive. Yeah, and
Right?
AI codecs is. I was only talking about it the other day, and I'm non-technical, so yeah, good point.
That is nuts, but in a good way, right? So, answering your question, right? So, I think the CEO of Dstny, Dan, has said this multiple times during some events. He was saying that voice is becoming the new OS, right? And what we really believe is that moving forward, what will happen is all of those applications that we are operating right now using some sort of, finger manual input or even smartphone applications, that will go away and go away in a way that you will start communicating with your business tools using your voice as a primary way. And now the question is, what is the better way, to talk with a machine than potentially sometimes, calling a number, and on the other side, what you will have is an automated system that responds, that is profiled for you, that understands who you are, understands the context of your conversation, and simply by saying, "Hey, receptionist, tell me what is the next customer I should be calling," and then based on everything that you've been doing, it will give you an answer and probably set up a call for you, and that is good, right? Because what all of a sudden happens is that instead of spending time on putting data into a system using user experience methods that are not natural to human beings, we can switch into using voice, and we can switch in a way that is very efficient, right? So I think that this is where, on one hand, in terms of voice, this is going, and on the other hand, what we are predicting is a massive advent of mobile first services. And by what I mean by that is, really, if you will think at what happened across the years, I mean, there was this whole thing about, yes, your mobile phone will become your business center. It did. You can do a lot, but I'm honestly personally annoyed every time I need to flip through a million of applications, copying things, between one and the other. So I think that currently what is the way to go is that really your phone, and even the native dialer, right? I'm not talking even applications in your phone. The native dialer can become a way for a business person to start interacting with business applications where, I don't know, you don't have free hands to do it, or maybe you're just simply too lazy to do. That's more or less what we're seeing.
I think that's really interesting because obviously the primary most natural communication medium for humans is voice, and we've been forced over the last few decades to interact with machines in a different way, by typing and doing whatever, because the technology wasn't there. We sort of reached that over the last few years, but then the second point, in terms of tying that into the simplicity of just being able to do that natively within a mobile phone, and simplify that down by calling a number and using that does seem to sort of tie those things together. So I think that voice as an operating system is a really interesting, and it's a really positive concept, I think, for everyone involved in the industry.
Yep, that it is. I mean, we are becoming relevant again, which is good.
Yeah, and like you said, the more discussion, I've had more discussion about voice codecs over the last 12 months than I'd had in any previous time. So that's pretty much all we've got time for. Michal, that was really interesting. Thank you so much for joining me today for the discussion. For anyone listening or watching this on YouTube, if you'd like to learn more about Dstny from a service provider perspective or from a customer's perspective, and how they're thinking about the future of voice, AI, and how they're helping service providers, you can find more information if you head to dstny.com. So that's dstny.com. But that's it for today's episode of Cloud Conversations. All it leaves me to do is say thank you to Michal, and I look forward to seeing with you and chatting with you again at our next event about this.
Thank you for having me, Patrick.
Absolute pleasure. And thanks everyone for listening. Do make sure you like and subscribe to the podcast. And until next time, it's goodbye from Cavell.